Morning, Nabil.
We're about to get started.
Tell me a baby. You've been on the finance committee, the audit committee is perfect.
Fine, just touch the screen.
I'm here. That's all.
Okay, are we ready to get started? Waiting for the cue. We're recording.
We're recording and we're good to go, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this hybrid MetroPlan Orlando board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Commissioner Viviana Janer and I'm chair of this board. We do have several board members physically present to make our quorum. The rest are joining us virtually. I like to ask all board members attending in person to please speak directly into the microphones so that those joining us virtually can hear clearly. Board members joining us online will participate in the discussion and vote on action items, and the public will be able to participate virtually as well. Now it's time for our Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked my Vice Mayor Benson to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask any of those members joining us virtually to please keep yourself on mute unless you're going to be speaking or placing a vote. So we will have two opportunities, as always, for public comment during the meeting. One to comment on the action items toward the beginning of the meeting and a general comment period at the end. If you would like to comment, there are instructions on the screen on how you do it, and you have 2 minutes. So we have new AV equipment for those of you that didn't join us in person last time. So this is a significant change. You each have a monitor in front of you. This is part of the new AV system. Jason provided a brief presentation on the new equipment last month, and we have several members again, that weren't here last month, and hopefully you were all trained. I saw Jason going around before the meeting. Thank you, Jason. But basically, if you see this little red light, you're unmuted and you could speak. And when the red light is off, you are muted. So that's just the very basic, and you press the little middle speaking icon if you need to speak. So, but if you do get stuck and need assistance during this meeting, just please let staff know. Jason's right there to help you. So thank you, Jason. So we did have TDLCB, a Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board meetings on May 13th and May 25th. I don't see Commissioner Uribe here. Do we have a report?
I have not seen.
We'll
her either.
circle back to her if she comes in, because She's our representative on that board. So now I'll recognize Mr. Gary Huntman, our Executive Director, for his announcements.
Thank you, Chairwoman Janer, and good morning, board members. I just want to remind those attending virtually, and this is for the last time, to use the *6 to mute and unmute yourselves, and use the *9 to raise and lower your hand if you're attending online. We have one board alternate with us this morning. Vice Mayor Benson from the city of Apopka is here. Good morning, Vice Mayor. Good to have you. Thanks for being here. Last month, I reported out, or we heard reports from two of the board members that attended the virtual MPO AC Institute, the live online version. And that was a good report. This month, I'm happy to report that Mayor Woodruff has registered for the online course, and that's the course where you work through a series of modules on your own. And there are instructors available to answer any questions. So thank you, Mayor, for taking the time to do that. The Best Foot Forward program, we hear a lot about that and a lot about safety. We're going to hear more about safety this morning. But last month we had a presentation from Ryan Matthews, our Tallahassee lobbyist. And today I'm sorry to report that the request for the $100,000 was vetoed out of the governor's budget. So we'll have to find a way to try and make that up. I attended the American Public Transit Association virtual fly-in one day last week, a very good event. I spent time with the staff members of all of our federal representatives talking about stimulus and how we can work together. So it's a very productive meeting. Recently, the Senate Public Works Committee released their bill, and that is very similar to what they released last year. It provides about just over 300 billion in contract authority. 90% of that goes through by formula. So we'll be hearing more about that. And then as recently as last Friday, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee released their INVEST Act. And that is for the federal reauthorization. And that is a more aggressive program. And in fact, the markup of that bill is going on today. And I received word last night that there's something like 200 amendments that have already been submitted for that. So they're anticipating a very busy day on that. The good news with that is you've heard me talk about the number of projects that have been submitted, and at least the draft bill that was released last Friday includes a good number of projects for Central Florida. So we're very fortunate. So let's just hope that they remain in there. I want to remind you all for your staff information that the RAISE grant is still out there, and we have until July 12th to submit projects under that program. And so far, I believe I just provided a letter of support for one project that I know is being submitted. And we continue to work regularly with DOT, coordinating on stimulus funding and improving that coordination and communication between us and them. And we look forward to working closely with the new safety office that's just been created. I had a meeting last week also with the Orlando Sports Commission, just kind of a get acquainted meeting with them and the application for World Cup in 2026 and how we might be able to help them on that, as well as with any future pursuits that they might have. So that was a good meeting. The National Association of Regional Councils annual conference begins Monday, the 14th, and it runs through the 17th. It was to have been held in Atlanta this year, but it will be virtual, and they're looking forward to getting everyone together later this year for the fall meeting. Then I want to announce that the DOT Mobility Week has been scheduled. It will take place from October 29th through November 5th, and you will continue to hear about that when we meet, and I'll provide information to update you as I receive it. Have been doing some staff announcements recently and have one more today. Taylor Laurent, who is our newest employee, has taken her AICP certification to become a certified planner. You may remember that I think it was last month or maybe 2 meetings ago that I announced that she had taken her PE exam and passed that. So she's now both a professional engineer and a certified planner. So we're very thankful for that. And then just to remind the board that our office doors are still closed to the public. We're still cautious about people just walking in as they sometimes would from the garage looking for directions or whatever. So we keep those doors closed. And then beginning July 1st, we're opening back up for in-person meetings. That will be our committees as well as the board. But we'll continue to provide and in fact encourage public participation virtually for a bit. Yeah. Chairwoman Janer, that completes my announcements. Now, with your permission, we can just transition straight to Secretary Perdue and his comments. Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I really appreciate the opportunity to give you an FDOT report today. We got a lot of exciting things going on. One of the items specifically I want to talk about today is something that we're doing as part of Secretary Tebow's vital few. He's brought much needed leadership to the agency. And one of his main focuses is safety. You all know, and many of us have adopted a Vision Zero to get to zero fatalities on our roadway transportation facilities, not just the state highway system, but all roadways. We want the state of Florida to achieve that goal. We're very passionate about it. And so one of the things we're doing in District 5 that we talked about a little bit last meeting is we're creating a new Office of Safety in District 5. It's going to be led by a district safety administrator that will report directly to myself as the district secretary. Part of the vision and goal here is to really elevate the conversation, bring inspiration, bring motivation, and find ways to bring all of our communities and organizations together to tackle this very important problem with one voice and with one mind and with one effort. We believe we can be successful, but we also understand it's a very, very big task. And we've all been working very hard at it over the last many years, and we still feel like we need to do better. We need to do more. So we've created this Office of Safety, and I'm very happy to announce that we've selected none other than our best to serve in this role. It's going to be Miss Lorene Bobo, who formerly served as our Director of Transportation Development. We're very excited about this. She has very, very big shoes to fill, but we don't even know what size those shoes are yet because nobody's ever been in this role. So we're excited about that. I'm going to give her an opportunity to talk about some of her vision and goals, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be in this new role. While it's exciting, it's also a little overwhelming, I will admit. So one of our first tasks is really to understand what we have been doing so that we can understand what we can do more, right? And all of our communities and our cities and our counties and the department and each of our units within the department have all been really working towards safety, but we're kind of disjointed. I think we're overlapping in places. And by doing that, I think we're missing some things. So the way I've been kind of visualizing it is, each of these units is like a big rock, right? We're all doing these things, but if I put them all into a jar, I can still see through those gaps in between those rocks. So I really want to fill in those gaps and really make a difference with safety in Central Florida. We're not going to do that alone. We're going to do that collaboratively. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be reaching out to the cities and the counties and towns within Central Florida and seeing how we can all work together to really make a difference. We can change everything on the roadway. We can add more, pedestrian crossings and things like that. But 94% of the incidents are caused by human behavior. So to me, that's a really big task that we're working on, but there's got to be more that we can do to really make a difference. There's lists that we're at the top of. I don't want to be on those lists anymore. We may never get off the list, but I want to be a lot lower on those lists. And so it's a daunting task, but I'm excited about it. And really, we're going to make a difference and make sure that everybody gets home every night to their families. I'll end with every day, every morning when my boys leave the house and they're in elementary school, I tell them to make good choices. So I'm asking all of you to continue to make good choices, make good, safe choices, and to share that with your neighbors, share that with your community. That's how we're going to really make a difference, is everybody working towards safety. So thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary Perdue, for the opportunity, and have a great day. Have a good, safe day.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Laureen. And we're really excited about this. And over the next several months, we're going to be developing a strategy, a strategic plan, and it is definitely going to include our local government partners and our MPO organizations. We want to do this thing together, so we're very excited about that. As part of this leadership change, we have appointed an interim director of development, Jack Atkins. If you'll just wave your hand so everybody can see. He brings a lot of wisdom to the leadership team. I'm not saying that because he has gray hair. He's actually been with FDOT for many years. So we're excited to have him there in an interim capacity. And with that, I did want to mention one other thing, Chairwoman. I wanted to talk a little bit about stimulus and what we've been doing to prepare. As you know, there's been a lot of speculative discussion at the federal level. You know, as Gary mentioned, they're working on infrastructure package. Also, the state legislature took action on that as they fully funded our $10 billion work program, and then also redirected an additional $2 billion from American Rescue Plan. As we're working through those details and beginning to understand, you know, what that's going to look like as a district, we are furiously working behind the scenes to be ready. And what that means is, you know, making sure that all of our projects that are advanceable are in a good place and ready to be advanced. We're looking at our program across the board. We're looking at the MPO, TPO priorities, making sure that we have them ready to go to the greatest extent possible. And with some of our bigger regional efforts like I-4, we are actually taking a step back, and we're approaching it from a value engineering perspective, and we're reimagining how we deliver this massive infrastructure project. As you know, beyond the ultimate to the south and to the north of I-4 Ultimate is a $4 billion+ investment. And so, you know, we don't know exactly what the stimulus money is going to look like, but we want to be ready to deliver that needed congestion relief as quickly as possible with the resources that are available to us. And so we're kind of reimagining how we can deliver that, and looking at quicker, more efficient pieces and segments of the overall beyond the ultimate footprint that we can build, bring that congestion relief, but still be set up for the ultimate footprint for 30, 40 years down the road. So we've been going through that effort. We've started collaborating with MPO staff. We started collaborating with some of the local governments along the corridor as we kind of bring these ideas to the table. And so we're really focused in on that. And we're going to continue as a district to focus on people, relationships, and communities, because that's really what's important to us, and that's how we deliver projects. So with that, Chairwoman, I'll yield.
Thank you, Secretary Perdue. It's always exciting to hear more money coming down the pike. There's usually the opposite. We're worried about where's the next dollar going to come from. Any questions for Secretary Perdue? Okay, seeing none, we're going to loop back to Commissioner Uribe for her TD-LCB report.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The quarterly TD-LCB meeting was held on Tuesday, May 13th. The meeting was held in a hybrid format. However, we were unable to meet the in-person quorum requirement for that meeting, and we had some important tasks to vote on that day. We did move forward after receiving reports from the Quality Assurance Task Force and the CTC update. An overview was provided on each of the action items in anticipation of staff working to find a date that worked for an in-person meeting. We reconvened on May 25th with an in-person quorum, at which time we approved the following items: the February meeting minutes, the minor updates to the 2020-2025 Transit Development Service Plan, and the rate calculation worksheet for FY 2021-22 Access Links TD rates. I want to thank staff for working so hard to make the meeting happen and the LCB members who attended. It was the shortest meeting we ever had in history, 11 minutes. This concludes my report. Our next meeting is August 12th, 2021. And consistent with all our MetroPlan meetings, it will be in person. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Uribe. I'm glad you were able to get a quorum and vote on those important
Us too.
items. So now it's time for our roll call. So I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Good morning. I will call the roll first for those that are attending in person. If you could say here or present when your name is called. Vice Mayor Bankston,
Here.
Commissioner Bonilla, Commissioner Constantine,
Here.
Commissioner Delary,
Here.
Mayor Demmings,
Here.
Commissioner Fisher,
Here.
Commissioner Gomez Cordero,
Here.
Commissioner Janer,
Here.
Commissioner Moore, Councilmember Trace,
Here.
Commissioner Uribe,
Present.
Mayor Woodruff,
Here.
Commissioner Zimbauer.
Present.
Okay, moving on to those that are joining us online. If you could please go ahead and unmute yourselves, and you can go on mute again after your name is called. You will find the mute and unmute buttons on the bottom left side of your toolbar. Please say here or present when your name is called. Mayor Bates. Here. Commissioner Booth.
Present.
Mayor Dyer.
Here.
Mr. Good. Commissioner Ortiz.
Present.
Commissioner Siplin. And now on to our non-voting members. Secretary Perdue,
Here.
Mr. Cap,
Here.
Ms. El Badri,
Present.
Mr. Jameson,
Present.
Mr. Muhison.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We'll now move on to our agenda review. Mr. Hutman.
Yes, Chairwoman Janer, we have one minor change to the agenda this morning, and that is on agenda item 12C. And that is the CFX master plan presentation. Glenn Pressimone from the Expressway Authority will be making that presentation rather than Laura Kelly. She had something come up kind of at the last minute. So that's the only change. We're ready to move forward.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll move on to our committee reports. Our first one is our MAC committee, our Municipal Advisory Committee, Mr. Councilmember Trace.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Madam Chairwoman and board members. The MAC met last week, June 3rd, in a virtual workshop format. The items presented for our review and discussion included our May meeting minutes, FDOT amendments to the TIP, and plan revisions to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. While there was no formal action taken because it was a workshop, the MAC members did not express any negative concerns or feedback on the action items for today's agenda. So as such, I'll be voting in favor of the proposed action items. We also received the 3 informational presentations that are on today's agenda. And our next meeting is on July 1st, where we will have in-person meetings once again. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next is our Community Advisory Committee, Ms. El Badri.
Good morning, Chairwoman and Board. On May 26th, the Community Advisory Committee met in virtual workshop format. While no votes were taken at the May meeting, committee members were informed that in-person meetings will resume for the CAC on August 25th. MetroPlan Orlando Executive Director Gary Hutman provided context to a question that arose during our April meeting about MetroPlan Orlando's role in the Brightline expansion. One of our members has pointed out that Brightline's preferred route to Tampa through Central Florida is not the corridor that was recommended by previous studies. Mr. Hutman explained that MetroPlan Orlando is not directly involved in the decision-making, but is carefully monitoring Brightline's developments. We look forward to a presentation that Brightline will be providing to our Community Advisory Committee in the near future, so we can learn more about their decision and next steps. Members reviewed and discussed an action item on the proposed FDOT amendment to the TIP and revisions to the 2045 plan. MetroPlan Orlando staff answered questions from the committee about local funding sources and how funding is identified for projects. The committee heard presentations from MetroPlan Orlando about the draft transportation improvement program and the prioritized project list, and were informed about the TIP public meeting coming up on June 21. I wanted to give kudos to the MetroPlan Orlando staff for their phenomenally simple graphic that depicts how the MTP, TIP, and PPL all relate to one another. I think it was especially helpful for our newer members to understand the process that these projects go through to get to implementation. Members had some questions about the TIP, including the future need for truck stops as freight moves to more self-driving vehicles. They also had questions about additional details regarding the US 192 bus rapid transit project and sidewalk projects. Central Florida Expressway Authority staff presented a look at their master plan, and CAC members received a link to share and take a survey for the CFX future priorities. We were pleased to hear some of CFX's thoughts about capacity building without road widening. The next CAC meeting will be June 23, and it is expected to be our last virtual meeting. Madam Chairwoman, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. El-Badri. Next, we'll move on to our Technical Advisory Committee, Mr. Muhisen.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The Technical Advisory Committee met on May 21st virtually for we have one additional virtual meeting. We reviewed and discussed the FDOT amendment to the DOT amendment to the TIP regarding State Road 46 and the Sunset Drive Livable Street project, or Livable Street project, as well as the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan amendment on today's agenda. We heard presentations on the preview of the FY 2022-26 TIP, as well as the preview of the FY 2027 through 2036 prioritization project list. Also a presentation on the CFX 2045 master plan. We also heard a report on the May 4th meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee Pedestrian Safety Committee. If you recall, the Safety Committee was an ad hoc committee to provide a response to the Dangerous by Design report. This committee recommended the formation of a working group to improve pedestrian safety throughout the region by primarily focusing on corridor speeds. This working group would include representatives from FDOT, MetroPlan's Technical Advisory Committee, the Tismo Committee, the CAC Committee, and the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, as well as links. Also, representations would be sought from Best Foot Forward and local law enforcement. The group will work in coordination with the local community traffic safety team, and the establishment of this working group will be brought back to this board for approval at your July meeting. Our next Technical Advisory Committee will be on June 25th, and this concludes my report, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you so much. Next, it's time for our Tismo Committee report. Mr. Jameson.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The Tismo Committee met on Friday, May the 21st of 2021. Based on the direction of the board, this meeting was held in the virtual workshop with action items being discussed and reviewed, but no formal action taken. These items will be ratified at a future in-person Tismo meeting. During this meeting, we discussed our April 23rd Tismo meeting minutes, the FDOT request that the fiscal year 2020-21 through 2024-25 TIP be amended to include the Sunset Drive livable streets from Oxford Road to Button Road and State Road 46 resurfacing from east of Uppsala Road to French Avenue. We also discussed MetroPlan Orlando staff's request that the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan be modified and amended to include the fully funded transportation improvement program projects in the existing plus committed network, to expand the off-highway system program to incorporate additional multimodal needs and project types, to revise the congestion management process to include the updated data from FDOT pertaining to emergency response and roadway clearance times, and also some miscellaneous changes based upon the local agency feedback. While we did have a bit of discussion and clarification on this item, there were no comments that were asked to be provided to the board. We did not receive any presentations during the meeting, and this concludes my report, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jameson. Next, we'll move on to hear our public comments on our action items. Let's go ahead and see if we have anybody present first, and then see if we have anybody virtually. You have any speaker cards for public comment? Okay, so anybody virtually?
There are no hands, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, so no raised hands. So we'll go ahead and close that public comment period and move on to our action items. Our first item of business is the consent agenda. We
Madam Chair.
have.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda in tab 1 as presented.
Okay, okay, we have a motion for approval by Commissioner Delary, a second by Commissioner Rebe. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair, as you're moving to your next item, for the record, we'd like to acknowledge that Commissioner Nicole Wilson is attending as an alternate for Orange County.
Okay, I couldn't hear that.
Nicole Wilson from Orange County is an alternate right now.
Okay, didn't we take care of that?
Yes, we
at roll
received
call?
word shortly before the meeting
Oh.
started that Commissioner Siplin had something come up at the last minute. And so we pursued Commissioner Wilson to fill in, and she did.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner Wilson, for being the alternate. Okay, so with that, we will go ahead. We have two other action items today. The first is the FDOT amendment to the 2020, 2021 to 2024, 2025 TIP. And we're going to call on Mr. Caskey. He has a presentation for us. And your information is on tab 2.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The amendment request this morning includes a resurfacing project on State Road 46 in Sanford. And this project includes bicycle, pedestrian, and safety improvements. And then the other project is on Sunset Drive Livable Streets project in Castleberry. And this just involves moving the current construction funding for this project from the existing project number in the TIP to a new project number. And you all have the information on this in tab 2 in your package. So with that, unless there's any questions, we are asking for your approval of the amendment.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Any questions for Mr. Caskey? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Sembauer, a second by Commissioner Fisher, and this is a roll call vote.
Bankston.
Aye.
Bonilla. Constantine.
Yes.
Delary.
Yes.
Demings.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Cordero. Janer.
Aye.
Moore. Trace.
Aye.
Uribe.
Aye.
Woodruff.
Aye.
Zembauer.
Yes.
Okay, now for those joining us on Zoom, Mayor Bates.
Yes.
Booth.
Aye.
Dyer.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes.
Wilson.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the vote carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move to the approval of the 2045 MTP amendment, and we have Alex Troger here to present.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, here virtually with you this morning. And today we are taking up proposed plan revisions to our 2045 adopted Metropolitan Transportation Plan. As reported by our committee chairs, this was taken through our advisory committee process and a public review process. But as a little bit of background, we adopted our plan. You, as a board, unanimously approved our 2045 plan at your December meeting. Following that meeting, we continued to receive feedback from our local partners. And then in February, we, along with other 26 NPOs across the state, came together with the Federal Highway Administration and FDOT to discuss MPO planning products. And one of the topics discussed was improving consistency between planning products, particularly our long-range plan, our 2045 MTP, and our transportation improvement program. And that really is the impetus of today's plan revisions. So before we get into the particulars, we can go to the next slide. And I just wanted to summarize the types of plan revisions based on the FDOT MPO program handbook. Really two types. We have modifications and what we call amendments. In a nutshell, modifications do not impact cost feasibility of projects, so they don't impact cost rankings or what we call the scheduling of projects, where an amendment would. So these are more significant changes to cost feasibility of adopted projects. So that's a little terminology in a nutshell, but I'll jump right into the amendments. And as you mentioned in your introduction, Madam Chair, all the supporting materials are found in tab 3 of the agenda packet. But as reported by our chairs, the first amendment really was the impetus. This is including our adopted transportation improvement program into the front of our cost feasible tables. The previously adopted plan has only TIP projects that are funded beyond the year 2026. This modification includes all projects that are funded between years 20 and 25. The second is our off-system construction program. The plan adopted only allows capacity or widening type projects based on local feedback. We're broadening that program to allow any multimodal project type, so that's more inclusive, and also it can leverage TRIP funds, which we can talk about as Nick presents later today. The third is the amendment, and we're going to be removing a couple projects from the priority list based on local feedback because those projects are no longer going to be state or federally funded. We also had to update project cost for one of our intersection projects because it did not include the rail relocation fees, which obviously has increased construction cost. And the fourth modification is a change to our congestion management process, which is adopted along with our MTP. And we just included some updated data that we received from FDOT to make sure that all of the planning agencies are using the latest and greatest of data. So those are our proposed revisions today, modification and amendments to the 2045 plan. Be more than happy to answer any questions, but we are seeking your approval today for a roll call vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Alex. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion from Commissioner Delari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Alex, the question that I have would be, and I understand why we're making some changes to this plan, but with looking at the possibility of additional funds coming down from the federal government for stimulus, is that at all in your bandwidth to look at that of the potential? Because I want to make sure that we're keeping projects on the deck so that if additional funds does come down, either through the federal or the state, that we're have those projects queued up properly to take advantage of those additional funds.
Yes, certainly. So the MTP as adopted is a living document. So we will be amending and modifying throughout the life of its plan, different from years past. But as we receive, that information, any changes in costs or funds, particularly with anything kind of new federal or stimulus, we can be active to amend or modify the plan at that time. And that's where we really focus on our prioritized project list in the transportation improvement program. So I hope that answers your question. If not, I know Nick's on and can provide a little more.
Let me rephrase the question if I may then. I just want to make sure that all the projects that we have, that we can potentially make sure that they are, to coin a phrase, shovel ready, that we are teeing them up properly so that we can take advantage of any additional dollars coming into this area. That's what I want to make sure of.
And Alex, I can jump in on this one. We actually have not only our traditional plan, which identifies all of the cost feasible projects, but then we have the new program, which I'll talk about a little bit more in our priority list, which actually looks a little above and beyond and gets at the projects that may have already had the planning, design, and right-of-way done. So almost those shovel-ready projects we're identifying for this new program that could support either the stimulus or the program that we identified in the MTP. So we'll have not only projects going through their planning through construction phases already in the tip that's flowing from the MTP, but we'll also have that new program to help support any new money that comes down from DC.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other further questions? Okay, looking
Move
for a
approval.
motion. Approval by Mayor Damon
Second, Uribe.
and a second by Commissioner Uribe. Let me see, this is also a roll call vote.
Bangston,
Aye.
Bonilla, Constantine.
Yes.
Delari,
Yes.
Demmings,
Aye.
Fisher, Gomez Cordero, Janer,
Aye.
Moore, Trace, Uribe,
Aye.
Woodruff, Zimbauer,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Booth, Dyer,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
and Wilson.
Aye.
The vote carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we do have some information items for acknowledgement in our packet. Looking for a motion to acknowledge them.
So moved, Uribe.
We have a motion by Commissioner Reby, second by Commissioner Moore. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Perfect. Okay, now it's time for our presentations. And our first one is a preview of our fiscal year 2021, 2022 through 2025, 2026 tip. Mr. Caskey.
Okay, well, good morning again. Just want to give you all a preview of the new 22 to 26 TIP. And this will be coming back as an action item at your July meeting. And wanted to start off with a brief overview. I think most of you all are pretty familiar with this, but the TIP is one of the main documents that we as an MPO are required to produce based on federal and state legislation. And the purpose of the TIP is to identify all the transportation projects that are funded in our region over the next 5 years with federal or state funds. So any federal or state funded transportation project has to be included in our TIP. And then we have the option to include locally funded transportation projects in our TIP for information purposes. And we've always done that since those are important projects as well. And then the TIP is updated on an annual basis. So we'll be back about this time next year with a preview of another new TIP. Now this slide shows the amount of federal and state funds that are programmed over the 5 years of the TIP. And this is broken out by the main categories of projects in the document. And all of these federal and state funded projects have to be approved by this board to be included in the TIP in order for these projects to move forward and be implemented. And this amounts to over $3 billion worth of projects. Now, the process of developing this new TIP actually started last year when we put together the fiscal year 2026 to 2040 prioritized project list. And the prioritized project list is another document that we update every year. And you'll be hearing Nick's preview of the new prioritized list in the next presentation. But this is the one from last year. And we like to call this a bridge document because it kind of fills in the gap between our TIP, which covers the next 5 years, and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which has a target year at least 20 to 25 years out in the future. And this list included projects that were either completely unfunded or had unfunded phases in the 5-year work program and TIP as of last year. And it included highway, Tismo, bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects. And the projects on each of these lists were ranked by priority as candidates for funding. And this was used by FDOT to develop their 22 to 26 tentative 5-year work program. And then we used the work program to put together this new TIP. Now, I wanted to start off by looking at the highway projects that were in last year's prioritized project list. And these are divided into 3 main categories. We have the National Highway System projects, and these are major capacity improvements to I-4. So these primarily include the Beyond the Ultimate improvements, but then there's also the truck parking facilities project as well. And then there's a list of projects on the state roadway system. And this is a mixture of different types of projects. Some of these involve adding lanes to roadways, but most of these are non-capacity, what we call context sensitive or complete streets projects, which are designed to help improve safety and traffic flow in an existing roadway corridor and without adding capacity. And so these can include a combination of different types of projects, such as minor intersection improvements and putting in sidewalks and bike lanes and bus pull-offs and so on, depending on how much space is available within the corridor. And then there's a similar list of different types of projects on roadways that are mainly off the state road system. And for the purpose of today's presentation, I mostly want to focus on those projects in last year's prioritized project list that have had new phases funded in the new TIP. So for the National Highway System projects on I-4, the only project on that list that has a new phase funded is the construction of truck parking facilities in the I-4 corridor throughout our 3 counties and also extending into Volusia County. And FDOT has program funding for construction for this project in fiscal year 2026. And then the other projects on the list would be on the ultimate improvements, and those are all still funded through right-of-way. So there weren't any major changes for those. But I did want to point out that priority number 4 is the Beyond the Ultimate segment from east of State Road 434 up to the Seminole-Volusia County line. And the right-of-way phase for that project is now funded through fiscal year 2026. And last year and in previous years, the right-of-way phase for this project was only partially funded, and now it's fully funded. Then we have the projects on the state road system, and there were 4 projects on that list that I found that have new phases funded in the new TIP. The number 3 priority is the 4-laning of US 1792 from the Polk Osceola County line to west of Poinciana Boulevard in Osceola County. And that has a new design phase funded in fiscal year 2026. And that's also true of number 5, which is the 6-laning of State Road 535 from US 192 in Osceola County up to World Drive in Orange County. Then number 6 is the intersection improvement at State Road 434 and Ronald Reagan Boulevard in Longwood. And that's now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2022. And then number 16 is a context-sensitive improvement project on Robinson Street from Garland Avenue to Crystal Lake Drive near downtown Orlando. And that has construction funded in 2024. Then we have the list of projects that are mainly off the state road system. One exception to that is priority number 2, which is a set of roundabouts on State Road 434 from west of State Road 417 to south of Artesia Street in the Winter Springs Oviedo area. And this project is now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2025. And this is an interim project prior to the 4-laning of 434 from 417 down to Franklin Street. And the 4-laning project is included on our list of state roadway projects. And Seminole County staff had requested that this interim project be put on the off-state road system list so it could be funded more quickly. Then I combined priorities 3 and 4, which is the context-sensitive improvements on Virginia Drive, Forest Avenue, and Corinne Drive from Orange Avenue to Bennett Road in Orlando. This project is now partially funded through construction in fiscal year 2026. It has about $3.5 million in federal SU funds program for construction, and the total construction cost for the entire project is somewhere around $9 million. And then number 5 is a context-sensitive project on East Church Avenue in Longwood, and that's funded for construction in 2025. Number 15 is a context-sensitive project on Orange Boulevard near Sanford, and that's funded for construction in 2026. And then number 20 is a context-sensitive project on Warren Avenue in Longwood, and the planning study for that project is now underway, and it has design funded in 2025. Then we have our transportation system management and operations projects, and these are relatively low-cost projects that help improve safety and traffic flow. And so they include projects like minor intersection improvements and traffic signalization coordination and dynamic message signs and other technology projects such as that. And under this category, we have a list of countywide and citywide projects. And the first 2 priorities on that list are the upgrades to Orange County's traffic signal cabinets, and that's now funded for construction in 2025. And then under other Tismo projects, there were two projects, both in Osceola County, that have new phases funded. Number 4 is the adoptive signal system on Osceola Parkway, which is now funded for design. And then number 11 is roundabouts on Marigold Avenue in Poinciana, and that's now funded for construction. And then we have the regional trail and school mobility projects. And there are 4 school mobility projects that have new phases funded. And these are all sidewalk projects near elementary schools in Osceola County. And 3 of these projects are now funded for construction, and the other project has a new design phase funded. And then there are 5 regional trail projects that are all funded for construction. 3 of these are in Orange County. They include the Little Econ Trail Phase 3, the Sandspur Trail in Maitland, and then the Shingle Creek Kirkman Trail. And then the other 2 are both in Seminole County, and they include the Central Casa Verde connectivity improvements, and then the Spring Lake Road Trail in Altamont Springs. And then under the transit projects, we have a list of projects that are implemented by links. And I'm not going to go through all those, but they include projects like purchasing buses and other vehicles, putting in transit centers and super stops and so on. And then for the last several years, MetroPlan has had a policy of setting aside up to 30% of this area's district dedicated revenue funds. And those are state funds for the operation of premium transit projects. And those are projects that have been identified in our Metropolitan Transportation Plan as being over and above regular fixed route bus service. So these can include any type of rail transit, such as commuter rail or light rail and so on, as well as bus rapid transit in an exclusive corridor and trolley systems and things of that nature. And these projects have been divided into 3 categories based on their eligibility to use the DDR operating funds. So category A are those premium transit projects that have had their planning and feasibility studies already completed. So these are the most ready to use the operating funds once they're up and running. And this list of projects is the same as it's been for the last few years, and there really weren't any changes to these projects. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but we still have as the number 1 priority, the Sunrail Phase 3 that would run from the Sunrail main line near the Meadowood Station over to the Orlando International Airport. And this project may be done in conjunction with the Brightline system that's currently underway. And then we have the OIA connector, which would most likely be a bus rapid transit system running from the Orange County Convention Center to the airport. And then there's a US 192 BRT project in Osceola County and so on. And as I said, these other projects, there were no changes since last year. Then we have category B. These are the projects that have not had their planning and feasibility studies completed yet. So once those studies are completed, these projects can move up to category A and be eligible for the DDR operating funds, but right now they're not considered to be eligible. And the first 4 priorities on that list have been on the list for several years. We still have the Innovation Way Corridor Enhanced Transit in East Orange County. And then priorities 2 through 4 are all projects along International Drive that are being planned by Orange County. And then in last year's prioritized project list, there were 3 new projects added under category B. And these are all enhanced transit corridor studies along 3 different corridors in our region, including US 1792 from downtown Orlando up to State Road 436, and then along US 441 from Apopka down to Florida Mall, and then the Pine Hills Kirkman corridor down to Universal Orlando. And then category C are projects that are just enhancements to Lynx's existing fixed route bus system. So these are not considered to be premium transit and are not eligible for the DDR operating funds. And these include the expansion of Lynx's existing fixed route bus fleet and also bus service expansion on various major corridors in the area that have been identified by Lynx. And then finally, last year's prioritized project list included a list of locally funded roadway widening projects that were candidates for Transportation Regional Incentive Program or TRIP funds. And these are state funds that local jurisdictions can use for major transportation projects. But in order to use these funds, they have to come up with at least 50% in local matching funds. And I didn't see any of the projects on that list that received TRIP funds in the new 5-year work program. However, the 4-laning project on Neptune Road from Parton Settlement Road to US 192 in Osceola County is now funded through right-of-way in fiscal year 2021. And the majority of those funds are Osceola County's local funds. But this project did receive $500,000 in federal SU funds for right-of-way in a recent TIP amendment. And that makes this project eligible to receive additional federal funding. So that's an overview of how some of the projects in last year's prioritized project list had new phases funded in the new TIP. And I did want to mention that, of course, this area has a lot of toll road projects as well. And I didn't include those in the presentation today, just in the interest of time. And since those are not part of the prioritized project list, but obviously those are very important projects. And of course, we're including the Turnpike and CFX projects in the TIP as well. And then we will be having our public meeting on the TIP. This will be a virtual meeting on our website. And this will be Monday, June 21st from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this will be, we'll be sending out additional information on that. And of course, everyone is welcome to attend the meeting. So Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, that concludes my presentation. And at this point, I will open it up for questions.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, I
Okay.
have one question.
All right, go ahead, Mary Demi.
You may have said it, but what's the actual completion date for the I-4 Ultimate and the Beyond the Ultimate? What are the projected completion dates?
Well, my understanding, the I-4 Ultimate is currently under construction. I believe that the last information I heard was that the general use lanes, those have already been completed, and then the managed toll lanes are supposed to be completed, I believe, by the end of this year or possibly early next year. But I would have to defer to FDOT if that's changed. As far as the Beyond the Ultimate, the construction for those projects has not yet been funded. So it would be, sometime out beyond fiscal year 2026. But I don't have any information on the completion of those projects at this point. But I believe we are planning on having an update from FDOT staff on the Beyond the Ultimate projects in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary, unless you,
Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Demings, for those questions. I can actually speak to that. With I-4 Ultimate, we actually are on schedule to open the managed toll lanes in the center of I-4 by the end of this year. We're very excited about that. You can actually see significant progress out there. It's really starting to come together. The general use lanes, that was a milestone we reached at the end of last year. Those are in their final configuration. They're in their final resting place. The only exception with those is there's some final paving left to do for the final friction course. But so everything's on track. And the managed toll lane should be open by the end of this year. So we're very excited about that. As far as Beyond the Ultimate goes, I mentioned earlier that right now we're working on it's a $4+ billion investment to do the entire Beyond the Ultimate footprint south of I-4 Ultimate and north of I-4 Ultimate. And, many of those are in different phases of production. We've got some right-of-way funds on several of the segments to the south and also to the north. And we're also going through this value engineering process to kind of reimagine how we deliver this project, because there's parts of Beyond the Ultimate we can do sooner, quicker, and more cost-effective that still deliver congestion relief early on. And so we're working through that. And I did want to mention that the Sand Lake Road interchange, Champions Gate interchange, and also Darrell Carter are all actually part of the bigger Beyond the Ultimate footprint. And those are all scheduled to go to construction within the next year. So those are moving forward.
Madam Chair, the board will be receiving a presentation on the Beyond the Ultimate project at the July board meeting.
Okay, excellent. So maybe some of the questions will be a little bit more clear. Commissioner Delary, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Keith, I have a question for you on the TIP. I know that the widening of the 417, which is controlled by the Turnpike, is on the TIP. In my meeting with the Turnpike folks, I asked them about the stormwater for that bridge, because right now it's handled by scuppers, and the stormwater is going directly into Lake Jessup. And in my conversation with them, they informed me that they're going to be following that same design. And I was asking them about the mitigation plan for that, and they weren't willing to commit to what that mitigation plan would be, because it's too cost prohibitive to commit to it now. And they're supposed to give me some more information. I've not heard anything, and I wanted to know if the MetroPlan staff has heard anything about it.
I have not heard anything about that.
That's what I kind of figured.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes,
Madam
sir.
Chair, I can handle that.
Yeah.
Commissioner, we did receive a letter from the Turnpike as well as a link to several documents on that. So you should have that in your email.
I know that, but in those documents and those links, they don't really talk about the stormwater mitigation for that bridge. People may not be aware of it, but that is an impaired lake. And the more we keep on impairing it, the bigger the dollar cost is going to be.
Commissioner Reby.
I'm not gonna ask too much because I know you just offered to, but Secretary Perdue, this is gonna be a question that I have for you. When we do the ultimate overview and where we are, you can't help but notice already that there's still congested pockets that were there before and that are still now. Can we talk about how you've identified them? What's the plan, or in the final product? We're hoping this will happen. Like, for instance, the downtown corridor between Parr and Colonial and the connector to the 408. Those are big areas before that were a problem, and they continue to be a big problem in an area. And just if you're able to elaborate, maybe when you talk to us, when we talk about the ultimate being done, those areas that continue to still be a pocket of serious concerns, how, when we see this project come to fruition completely, those, how we hope to see that play out to be better.
Madam Chair, I can speak to that.
Okay.
I was gonna say.
Thank you, Commissioner Uribe, for that. That's actually an excellent point. And so one of the advantages of I-4 Ultimate, what it's done is it's basically taken a lot of conflicting movements and conflicting trips and designed an overall footprint that best manages those trips and gives people choices. So we've reconstructed the general use lanes, which in and of itself has taken a lot of restricting horizontal and vertical curves that slow people down. We've added additional auxiliary lanes that actually connect interchanges so that those trips that are just going from interchange to interchange don't have to interact with that through traffic. And then we're providing the managed toll lanes in the middle as a congestion management tool. And that's something that you use when you get in with constrained right-of-way, which, the right-of-way through this corridor is very constrained and very expensive. And so what it does, it doesn't actually make the congestion go away, but what it does is it actually reduces the overall duration of peak congestion and raises the average speed along the corridor for the entire day. And so it's expected to provide a significant amount of congestion relief going through the downtown area. You still may experience those pockets of congestion during the peak of like commuter traffic, say in the AM and PM, but what it's going to do is bring the duration of that down and also raise the average travel speed over the whole day. So the overall trip should be way more reliable, way safer, and more predictable.
Okay, Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you. Yes, I remember, Secretary, when you first started this, or not you, but the DOT, how the biggest problem was to manage.
Could you turn on your microphone? I'm sorry. The middle center large one.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me. Usually nobody complains about the level of my voice, that was the managing of the expectations of folks thinking that now it was going to be a nice clear path to go through I-4 when the question was never that the level of service was going to be improved, just the reliability is mostly. But that wasn't the question. The question, since we've asked when everything else is going to be completed, when is the Wekiva Parkway going to be completed?
Tackle that one.
That's his.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And y'all are really putting me on the spot today. Thank you. I'm actually very excited about the Wekiva Parkway. It's a very important part of the overall network of choices that we're trying to provide to people, which don't just include choices for vehicles. They also include choices for people who like to ride the train, choices for people who like to ride the bus, bicycles, pedestrians. We're trying to complete this overall network. Wekiva Parkway, we are very confident that we're going to be able to open to traffic by the end of 2022. So we're very excited about that.
Okay. Any other question? Commissioner Moore? did you have a question?
I can do that. Yes, I wanted to just
Secretary,
ask.
to prepare yourself.
No, I'm glad to hear about the Wekiva Parkway. We're also happy, Gary, that you've got the Rock Springs, Welch Road corridor and planning. So I look forward to the day that I'm voting for it on the TIP. The question that I had was about the truck stops, that the completion date wasn't till 25, 26. Is there any way to expedite that? Because I could tell you in my district, I'm dealing with trucks parked everywhere. And to think that we're not going to get there for the next 5 years, it'd just be nice. Is there the opportunity to expedite the truck parking?
We have another compadre,
I was
don't we,
saying,
guys?
we'll trade your complainers for
Yeah, for
ours.
our complainers.
I don't know.
Yep. Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Another great question. And I can tell you, I have lived in Central Florida for a year now, and within a few days of arriving here, I quickly learned that truck parking on I-4 was a very, very important topic. And so I have I learned fast. I've adopted that as a very important topic for myself and for District 5. That we have actually just kicked off the PD&E for that. We're looking at the entire I-4 corridor in Central Florida, the 3 counties. It's a very challenging topic because right-of-way is obviously very constrained. We're looking at every opportunity to meet the demand. Right now, we're estimated in the next 10 to 20 years to have a shortage of over 700 spaces. So it's really truly a huge capacity issue, but it's also a very big safety issue because these truck drivers need places to stop. So we're looking at that. We're going to look for every opportunity to advance. But first, we have to identify, exactly how we're going to solve this problem and where viable sites or locations are. And we have to very closely coordinate that with the local communities because, as you know, it's very, very sensitive with regards to where they're located and where they fit the best. And so, the coordination with the local communities is going to be very, very important with regards to where we go. So there's a part of the process we just have to get through to make sure we have the support of the whole community. And as we go along, we're going to look for every opportunity to go faster. That's my commitment to you. So.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, you're off the hook, Secretary Perdue. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next presentation. That's our preview of the fiscal year 2026, 2027 through 2035, 2036 prioritized project list. That was a mouthful. Mr. Lepp, I believe you're on.
Thank you very much. And we'll just shorten that to PPL. How about that for now? Next slide, please. So as was brought up earlier, this is the famous graphic. The prioritized project list is the bridge that gaps the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or the cost feasible portion of that plan and identifies those projects that are what's next to go into the Transportation Improvement Program. Our Metropolitan Transportation Plan is now a 25-year plan, which includes all of the TIP. But with new rules coming out, our prioritized project list is no longer mirroring that horizon as a 2040 priority list, as Keith identified earlier. It's now a 10-year plan. Only the projects identified in the first 10 years that are cost feasible can be moved into the Transportation Improvement Program. Anything outside of that is still looked at as a need and considered cost feasible, but it would require an amendment to advance into the improvement program. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's a direct linkage between that 2045 plan that goes into the priority list. They have to be this identical. Our old plan, which is the 2040, really was a get the red out modeling long range plan that identified a lot of widening of state roads. Now our new plan identifies not only the projects on the national highway and state roads down to Tismo, complete streets and widenings, but now our multimodal lists are consistent within the plan with what we have been proposing as a prioritized list for programming. And we have all of those projects identified in their own lists to identify cost feasibility. And all of that is consistent with our MetroPlan funding policies as we look at our TMA funds and dedicate those towards complete streets, Tismo projects, bike ped, and transit. Next slide, please. As I brought up before, the project evaluation uses a performance-based planning approach, which takes into account all of the performance measures attached to goals and objectives in the plan. and identifies them as a ranking or gives them a point structure to look at where our highest priorities are that will meet the targets that we've established within the plan. Discussed at our last meeting were some weighting and some other criteria and maybe some emphasis on vulnerable users with bike ped crashes. And I'll go over how that changed and looked at the priority list over this next couple slides. Next slide, please. So just a little context, I asked the board and the committees to weight the goals and objectives, and that's what we came up with through the end of that survey process. Safety and security was the number 1, access and connectivity, number 2, with investment in economy, reliability and health down on the weighting structure. That doesn't mean that they were discounted. It just means that safety and security and access and connectivity had additional weight applied to them as we looked at the rankings going forward this year. Next slide, please. So to set a little context, Keith mentioned the difference between on-state and off-state system. So on-state system is mainly the map on the left, which identifies all of the black and red roads. Those are the national highway and state road system. And that's a priority list that we submit to the department as they try to move those projects forward. Now, the map on the right is the rest of our national highway system. And these are a lot of the projects that we try to fund through that TMA program of complete streets, bike ped, sidewalks, Tismo, and transit. And that's a little bit smaller pot of money, and that's what we talk about under those separate lists. Next slide, please. So we actually have multiple lists. We have a priority list that identifies all of the federal and state funds that would go on the national highway and state roads. And then we also have a couple other lists which identify all of our TMA funds. And those are the ones that require an authorization, since we've already put them in our MTP and separated out those projects for off the state system. Doesn't mean that they're not eligible for on the state system. We would just need to go through an amendment to make sure we align the project with the funding categories that we have in the plan. Next slide, please. So here are some of the new programs that were identified in this new plan, because the last priority list that Keith mentioned was based off of that 2040 long range plan. And with the adoption in December, we have a new priority list, new policies, and actually new programs. So for example, those other arterial funds, which we have kind of 2 pots of funds, that's other arterials, a combination of federal and state funds that go into the Highway Infrastructure Bank. And that's the larger pot that we use to identify cost feasibility. Well, we added a new program within there, and we're looking to box some of those funds to be used towards Tismo technology on the national highway system, very similar to the way we've applied that to our TMA funds off the state road system. We figured that would be good to complement the area and support our Tismo activities. We also have a new off-system construction, which is identified in the plan, but actually just went through the amendment in front of you to be an off-system construction assistance program, which will use 10% of those other arterial funds, mainly about the federal portion that's within that pot, for use off the state road system to assist with widenings or other multimodal projects that are beyond our TMA program funding policies, because that policy has a cap of a $4 million construction. And a lot of these projects exceed that cost, which would have a significant impact on local governments to support the rest for construction. So for this program, though, what's required is that the local governments perform all of the early work, the PD&E, design, and right-of-way, and this program would be available to assist with the construction of that project, and also could be used to leverage some of those TRIP funds as a match. So this is a new program that we'll be working towards over the next couple of years before it becomes available for funding in fiscal year 25-26. Our MPO managed TMA funds largely remain the same, looking at pulling out funds for special studies, which included the Corinne Drive study, which we completed through this task, and we're currently working on the 10th Street Complete Street study. We're also looking at a new program for safety emphasis. This could be a pot of funds that we're boxing up to support some efforts that may come out of the Best Foot Forward, but then also where we might uncover some other safety problems that we need to advance into. Bike ped still remains the same, looking at sidewalk gaps and school mobility. And then our Tismo program keeps the signal retiming program that's been very popular, also supports our regional Tismo program, and then added a demonstration section for ACES projects, which we'll be working with our technical advisory committee to identify those demonstration projects. Next slide, please. So based on the updated rankings, these are the projects that are the top 6 based on a neutral weighting. I know I came up to you last month and we discussed weighting opportunities and also some recommendations. This was the original ranking based on unweighted that we have presented to the committees for review and comments. Next slide, please. And then we started looking at the projects weighted based on the recommendations that we had in the slide I had before you, with safety on the top and accessibility as number 2. And then the list on the right is actually the project rating weighted with the pedestrian emphasis. So with the unweighted, or with the weighted and unweighted, there was very little change with the unweighted to the actual just weighting, and that's the left side. And I apologize for the typo on the slide. Very little change with just adding weighting on the state road list. However, when we added the pedestrian emphasis, we started seeing some of the other projects move up. Average about 2 to 6 points, and really an emphasis on some of those complete street and safety projects on the state road system. Next slide, please. This is the new program that we were talking about, the off-state road construction, and this is using that 10% of other arterial funds that was identified in DOT's revenue handbook for use in our MTP and planning purposes. These all still have to be LAP certified projects and agencies to implement them, but it is a program looking to utilize any of that pre-work that's being done by our local governments to assist with that construction, which is usually that hurdle to get over once they get through the initial work. So we're hoping that this could help advance some of those projects that we've had lingering on that trip list for years that were just outside of our policy for funding with those TMA federal funds. Next slide, please. This project ranking is largely based on information from our technical advisory committee, as they have submitted projects where they've identified previous phases that have been funded, with anticipation that these projects would be ready for construction sometime in the 25-26 timeframe, or even after that. And we'll continue to work with our advisory committees to make sure that these are on schedule before they're programmed for that construction. Next slide, please. As for the Tismo improvements, at the top, we always try to fund our programs first in our priority list. And then after that, the next priority is funding any projects that may have already had a phase in our TIP to finish that project through completion. And then these are the remaining projects, the top 5 projects that are going to start moving forward that may have some new phases like Pine Street and Canoe Creek to advance into the Transportation Improvement Program. Next slide, please. Surprisingly, between just the weighting and then the weighting with pedestrian really didn't have that much changes with the intersections based on the performance measures and the criteria. So nothing much changed there for the rankings between what's been presented and what's come up within the scenario. Next slide, please. Complete streets, we did see some change. Now here's the unweighted version, looking at projects moving up like West Warren and Central Ave and Michael Gladson up in Apopka. These projects started to move up just based on the new performance measures coming out of the 2045 plan versus what we were evaluating in 2040. Now next slide, please. And here's how you can see some of the projects started advancing just based on just weights. We started getting a couple of those projects to advance, but then adding the pedestrian component brought Old Dixie up as a higher priority because that actually had more pedestrian and vulnerable user issues on it. So it's starting to see our multimodal projects rise up based on that additional weighting in pedestrians. Next slide, please. Under bicycle pedestrian, most of these had the vulnerable road users. So here's what we had for the unranked or the unweighted version, mainly our school mobility and critical sidewalks at the top. But Little Econ and Shingle Creek have been our top priorities in the region for our regional trail system. And we still have on there as priorities the 2 Sun Trail projects, which would complete our section of the gap of the Coast to Coast Trail, prioritized as 1 and 2. Next slide, please. Links rankings largely haven't changed. The priority for in our plan and our priority list is still to support links capital investment and transit asset management. Our premium transit priority is Sunrail Phase 3 and that connection to the airport. But the other major priorities are really Link's southern operation base and northern operation base expansion, so they can continue to expand their system on the fixed route, which they are at capacity currently. Next slide, please. So when we applied the weights, the safety and complete streets increased by about 2 to 3 ranking points. But when we added the vulnerable users, that actually went up a little bit more, 4 to 8 places versus having an unweighted version. So the emphasis on bike and ped crashers is really starting to move those projects forward to meet that vulnerable user target, but then also meeting our safety targets. Next slide, please. So what we're looking for today is just board consensus on the use of weighting or unweighting or weighted with vulnerable user emphasis. We'll be coming back to you at the July 7th with whatever direction we receive, which will have the actual prioritized project list with the projects we're identifying for programming through the TMA program, and then the priorities on the national highway and state roads that would emphasize whichever direction we receive. So with that, I will open up to any questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Lepp on this weighted and unweighted approach? And I don't have in my notes, Gary, that we were going to do any consensus vote, but it seems like that was the ask. So would you like us to ask the board that?
Yeah, I believe that what Nick is asking for is, does the board want to see the priority list with the use of weighting, just weighting, or as we talked about last board meeting, splitting out safety to vulnerable users versus vehicular safety?
Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I would like to see this.
Madam Chair,
Mhm.
I think since safety is such a big issue, I think it's important for us to break that out so we can totally understand it and look at it from a comprehensive viewpoint. And I just wanted to make, and I think weighting is important, but I think from the safety standpoint, that's just as important. And I'd like to be able to clearly see that and broken out that way as well. That's just my input.
Commissioner Rebe, you wanted to? No? Okay. I guess I have a point of clarification. When you say safety, are you talking about vehicular safety? Are you talking about pedestrian safety? Are you talking as safety as a general?
It's an excellent question, but I think if we break it out, you'll be able to see it, to see which one's more pedestrian. And pedestrian could be bicycles, could be walkers, could be anyone that's not in a car. And I think it's important to look at it from that perspective. And if there's a way that we can look at those numbers, it's important to make those decisions based on that.
So based on our conversation last meeting, I think this was the approach that they were using, putting the weighted or unweighted. So is there any other way to break that down, I guess, is the.
Nick, you're just looking
Yeah.
for.
Just so what we presented kind of before was an unweighted version. And then the slides after where I had the comparison added a weighting to the unweighted priority list, and then also added the weighting plus a pedestrian vulnerable user index. And those were the ones on the right. And anything that had just the weighting projects for safety moved up between 2 to 4 spots. But when we added the extra emphasis for vulnerable users, it actually went up 4 to 8 spots in some projects. So that's the progression if we wanted to stick with the unweighted or move to a weighted priority list or a weighted with pedestrian emphasis priority list as we come to present to you for adoption. And
So it's already been done, it's basically.
Yeah, I have all 3 versions. It's just which direction would you like to see for your for adoption?
Okay, nobody speak at once. So I think that based on, yes.
I'm fine with number 3, as Mr. Lepp has described. I think that's what Commissioner Delory
Weighted,
is
yeah,
referring
weighted
to.
with the pedestrian
I
safety.
think that's what
That's
several
exactly what I
alluded
was
to.
gonna just say.
So I'm
Okay,
happy to move a motion in that direction, so needed.
well, we don't need a motion. It's
Okay.
just consensus because this was not on the agenda to vote, so. So unless anybody has any objections, that would be our consensus then. We have numbered your items, Nick. It's choice number 3, A, B, or C, choice C.
I like numbers, so those work
Okay.
with me. All right, option 3 it is. And we will come back and present this through the committees and bring it back to you next month for adoption.
Okay, for clarification, now that we went with action C or 3 or weighted with pedestrian, will that affect those areas that do not have a lot, pedestrians and, many pedestrians safety? How does that affect?
What it's going to do is
Right, because okay, a rural area where there's less people, then those projects might be put on the back burner versus a urban area with more pedestrians. That's my only concern with this whole looking at option 3. I know we have consensus, just asking.
Yeah, Nick, exposure is part of the criteria, right? I mean, you have to have pedestrians to meet the criteria.
It's really the pedestrian, the crashes and serious injuries that we have reported as the metric. So it's anywhere that has been a documented dangerous area is just getting more emphasis for that project to be prioritized higher. But it doesn't necessarily distinguish between urban or rural. It's based on really those serious injuries and fatalities. And when you deal with the vulnerable users, it's spread out.
Yeah, it doesn't, but it's still going to affect it. Every project in an urban area with lots of pedestrians is going to get up on the list, whereas roads, I think, on more rural areas are going to go down because it's just by the nature of the beast, right? There's not a lot of pedestrian on those roads. But anyway, thanks for the clarification. I was pretty sure that's what it meant. So we will move on to our next presentation. That would be the CFX 2045 Master Plan. And we have Mr. Glenn Pressimone. I hope I didn't mess up your name too bad.
We're good. Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Board members. I'm Glenn Pressimone, not Laura Kelly. Laura had a conflict this morning, so she tapped me late yesterday. So hopefully we can pull this off. And I think I'm advanced slide. Okay. So glad to be here in person. Have done a few in-person meetings myself, but it's good to see things coming back. I think everybody here is familiar with CFX. We were established in 2014 through legislature, although the agency's been around for more than 50 years. 2014 was a large change in 2 main categories. One, our jurisdictional limits and makeup of our board that went with that. And 2, the ability to entertain multimodal uses within our corridor. So that's been 2 areas since 2014. Next slide. This is the makeup of our board. I think very familiar to the folks here in this room. It's got 10 members. Just 2 months ago, or actually a month ago, we received our 2 final slots for governor appointees. And so we now have a full 10-member board. Next slide. The system encompasses approximately 125 centerline miles. Our jurisdictional limits are Brevard, Lake, Orange, Osceola, and Seminole, although the majority of those miles are within Orange County. We have a portion of road in Lake County as associated with the Wekiva Parkway. And then recently Poinciana Parkway came in and that's down in Osceola County. Next slide. Pre-pandemic, Central Florida was home to nearly 3 million residents and had tourists traveling this way to the numbers of about 75 million a year. Orlando Economic Partnership, they put out, at that time, 1,500 new residents were moving to Central Florida annually. I'm glad to see our traffic numbers, and I think that's been consistent with numbers I hear out of the airport, where pre-pandemic levels are returning. So I think these stats are going to come back or continue even beyond 1,500 a day. So that's one of the main reasons that we look to our master planning effort and are here to share with you the journey we're embarking on. Next slide, please. So our master plan is the foundation of our policy and capital programs. It's non-fundable. That's a main point of our master plan. It is a needs plan. And then as we annually update our 5-year work plan, and Keith mentioned that earlier, we just did that last month, and he'll be pulling those projects in. But that is our fundable plan. So we kind of bite it off in 10-year chunks and do a fundable plan over a 10-year period and bring it every year in a 5-year package to our board for approval. Next slide, please. So in 2040, which was the first master plan that the agency had the opportunity to put together, it was adopted in 2016. We did an extensive outreach to our community partners, the counties, the cities, and major stakeholders in the area. We're on that tour, so to speak, again. We covered lots of areas, lots of meetings. We've been everywhere at that time, out to Mascot and all the way to the east in Brevard County and Space Coast TPO. Next slide, please. So the 2040 master plan identified $11 billion in needs across the 4-county area. And I say 4-county because in 2016, Brevard County was not yet included into our jurisdiction. That happened in 2017. By 2025, we anticipate that about 2.5 billion of those identified projects will have been moved into our work plan and will be completed with construction. Next slide, please. Some of the highlights of those projects, this is no stranger to anybody here. 408, 417 interchange, originally opened in the late 80s and right around 1990. Operational improvements necessary to push the increased traffic over those many years. We opened this about a year ago and it's been very successful. Next slide, please. Current project underway is a very significant effort on the north side of the airport. This is 436 entrance into Orlando International. We have a beautiful new interchange on the south side with free flow movements in and out of the airport. And on the north side, we had some operational and safety issues because of the 1980s geometry of that existing interchange. So this project is about a year into construction and going very well. We had some opportunities to take advantage of decreased traffic and get a little bit more space for the contractor, and they're performing very well. So next slide, please. And I think everybody's familiar with Brightline. That change in our legislation allowed us to entertain multimodal conversations. An example of that would be the Miami to Orlando. That track is ready to start coming in. We've been working with Brightline on their proposed phase 2, getting from the airport to Tampa as well. Next slide, please. So we're beginning. We're probably about a quarter of the way into our tour on the 2045 master plan, and similar to the 2040, we're going to be using this as the major initiatives to set the mold for where we go. A big part of that is input from the community, input from the counties, input from stakeholders, and that's why we're doing this tour. The most important slide you're going to see here is going to be my last slide, and what that has is a address, web address for a survey, looking to get feedback. and, encouraging us to look at across the board at anything. Again, a needs plan, not a fundable plan. Next slide, please. So since 2016, we've been moving forward with projects that were identified in that 2040 master plan. We've added 16 centerline miles of new expressway. That includes our 10 miles in Wekiva Parkway area and acquisition of the Poinciana Parkway down in Osceola. Next slide, please. We're looking to continue the addition of capacity improvements. Main focus areas are the very southern end of 417. And those projects are all moving into construction and also out on 429. Next slide, please. Project planning is a big part of what we do, and our legislation and commitment when the acquisition of the Osceola County Expressway Authority was to adopt into our 2040 master plan what was called the OCX master plan projects, which is the ring along the urban growth boundary in Osceola County. We have moved forward and completed several concept feasibility and mobility studies of those projects and have one study currently underway. That's that very large blue area between Osceola and Brevard. We're calling that our Osceola Brevard connector. And the study area there is in line with the East Central Florida Corridor Task Force work through the DOT many years ago. Next slide, please. After the concept and feasibility study, our process would move a potential project into what we call the project development and environment study. We have completed or are underway on several of those. These here are the ones that we have completed or had underway since the 2016 plan was adopted. They include the Lake Orange Expressway, the north extension of Poinciana Parkway, Southport Connector, Osceola Parkway Extension, the Northeast Connector, Expressway Phase 1, and the State Route 408 Eastern Extension. Also on there, it looks, while it's the smallest line, it is one of the more significant ones, and that's State Route 414 Expressway Extension, trying to connect the limited access portion of our system at 441 to 4 City Road. Next slide, please. So these are the studies that are once complete, fully funded for construction as part of our 5-year plan. That includes the 414 Expressway Extension, Lake Orange Expressway, which is in final design, the Poinciana Parkway Extension up to 532, which is currently in final design, and the Osceola Parkway Extension, which PD&E has been completed, waiting to move forward with final design on that project. Next slide, please. So here's that most important slide. We're really here to let you know this is the effort that we're beginning, and wanted to answer any questions and encourage participation by everybody. We're going to be sending you out an email, everybody on the board, probably maybe to Gary, and we can get it out to all. You may get hit twice because we are coming to commissions. We're meeting with staff, but we're looking to get input. What are the top transportation needs in your areas? What can CFX do to help deliver those needs? We're looking at sustainability as a big piece of the program, and really appreciate any input that you can share. So with that, we'll be sending out the emails with that survey link, and appreciate all the input that you'll be able to provide.
Okay, and will you be including a copy of this presentation in that email as well?
We can.
So that we could have it? Yeah, I think that
Sure.
would be good. It'd be nice to share with our constituents in meetings and such. Any questions? Commissioner Moore?
Thank you so much, Glenn, for being here today. I really appreciate the effort you're making on the west side of Orange County with widening the lanes on 429 and eventually doing the extension of the 414. So we thank you for your support for all of our traffic flows on that northwest corridor.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so now it's time for our general public comment period. Do you have any members present? Joanne?
Yeah,
You know the drill. Name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
I know.
God bless you.
I'm Joan Canales and live in 324 Claremont Avenue, Lake Mary, Florida, 32746. Yes, we do need 24 hours train and bus service, including holidays, weekends, and nighttime. And we need the bus service at Country Club Road. Mr. Dollery and Mr. Over there, the white tie with the black tie on, Mr. Constantine,
Don't forget Zimmerman.
that we need 24, and you too. Yes, we need to have this bus, even on Sundays and holidays, for 45 from Seminole State College to its train station. And I'd like to have this at least 2 bus stop right there, one on each side of Country Club, the corner of the Country Club and Estella Road in Lake Mary, Florida. Please, don't forget that here, okay? Okay, and we need the bus over there at the Oviedo Boulevard in Oviedo, Florida, by the pool as well. It's over at the, like a big kahuna pool with the,
Yep, I
big
know.
kahuna pool. We need to have that bus there. The bus stop back there, 434, so that no one would be stranded coming out of there and going home like that. Okay?
Okay, Joan.
24 hours bus, including weekends, holidays, and nighttime. And we need 434 and 45 on Sundays and holidays, and including 46 west and east. Stuff like that.
Thank you, Joanne.
Okay,
It's
bye.
good to see you again, Joanne.
Me too.
Uh,
And I wear my special
And as
shoes.
Joanne knows, she has had many discussions, Madam Chair, with links, as you know, and we have analyzed all of her requests. Mayor Demings, yourself, and I are all in links. And the only question is the amount of service with everybody else and the money. So, that is being looked at, Joanne, and we have done that. We have worked with you, as you know, for a long time at Links.
Yeah.
I didn't say it was happening. I was just telling you, we are working with you on that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other requests to speak either in person or virtually? Do we have anybody?
Madam Chairman, we do not have any hands online at this time.
Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and close that public comment period. Our next meeting, guys, is on Wednesday, July 7th at 9 a.m. It will be fully in person, so return to normalcy, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.